Well, for more on this, we're now joined via Zoom by the Automobile Association of South Africa spokesperson, Layton Beard. Layton, thanks very much indeed for joining us. What's your take on this fuel levy drama?
Yeah, I must say I watched with interest the debate in Parliament this afternoon, Peter, and, obviously I think there's very strong opinions on both sides of the aisle. Opposition parties very much in favour of cutting the general fuel levy and also dealing more effectively with the road accident fund levy. Government maintaining that if that were to happen, they would certainly have a shortfall in terms of their revenue. Now, we know that the general fuel levy generates 90 billion rand thereabouts for the fiscus annually. I guess the big question that government needs to answer, or that the opposition parties need to answer as well, is if that levy is done away with, does government need to generate that 90 billion rand? And if so, where does it find the money and how does it generate that income? That's been the main motivator behind government resisting the calls to cut the GFL. It's very difficult for a government who is used to collecting such a large sum of money, very easy tax to collect, to actually, one day wake up and know that they don't have that money anymore in the kitty. So it's not a simple issue of simply saying we're going to cut it. It may be that government then looks for alternatives. I beg your pardon, for alternatives, and that may actually be, at the end of the day, a more jarring tax for South Africans to deal with.
As a person who drives a car, I wonder if perhaps better efficiencies might happen in the road accident fund, for example, because we know that has been raided, abused, and if that was managed properly, then perhaps we might be having a different conversation.
We certainly would be having a different conversation entirely. And I think that, when you look at the R2.18 that gets taken off every litre of fuel for the RAF, I think it's, for many South Africans, a very bitter pill to swallow. When you consider the debt that the RAF is in, the fact that that's a very poorly managed institution, it doesn't seem that that institution is going to get financially corrected anytime soon. It is challenging a qualified audit that it got. So there are very many issues at the RAF. The AA has for a long time said that private sector intervention is absolutely critical at the RAF. But let's add this into the mix, Peter. We have an over-reliance on the RAF in South Africa, and the reason is we have an incredibly poor road safety record. Now, the government, through the RTMC, the Road Traffic Management Corporation, puts the figure of the cost of crashes in South Africa annually at around 195 billion rand.
Wow.
So if you're looking to reduce a reliance on the RAF, the lead agency responsible for road safety in South Africa, the RTMC, cannot be having a budget surplus of 262 million rand in its 2021 financial year. All of that money needs to be spent on road safety initiatives, because if you make our roads safer, you reduce the reliance on the RAF. And by doing that, you may then reduce that amount, perhaps even scrap that amount that is needed to fund it through every litre of fuel. So the RAF is it's a problem. And certainly, I think in terms of dealing more effectively with that tax, there's a very good case to be made for that.
The other thing is the fuel price at the moment in terms of oil generally. Ukraine, Russia, yes. This isn't going to last forever, but I feel like we have these conversations here anyway, despite what's happening, that maybe the Russia-Ukraine thing is short term. If it was to end tomorrow, would we be in a better position?
I think in terms of oil supply and the effect that that would have on international oil prices, certainly that would mitigate against any future rise as well in this instance. So, obviously, if that conflict were to cease tomorrow, that would have a positive impact on oil prices, and it certainly would have a positive impact locally. And, I think the point that you make as well, Peter, which is very important, is that conflict is having an impact globally. Yes, South Africa is bearing the brunt of higher fuel prices, but the same can be said about countries such as England, many countries in Europe, in North America. These are countries that are facing similar record high fuel prices. And they would also benefit from that conflict ending. I mean, from a financial point of view, obviously, from an ethical point of view, we obviously want that conflict to end. From an economic point of view, that conflict ending would signal good news, we believe, in terms of global oil prices. Then you've got to look at the other factor, which is the Rand-US dollar exchange rate. And there you're looking for a climate of investment, you're looking for policy certainty, you're looking for red tape and bureaucracy to be eased so that investors can get to the country easier. These are the types of things that need to happen. I think this is part of the reason that motivated the AA, apart from the high fuel costs, to call for a complete review of the fuel price and its structure and its composition, so that we can establish whether all of these components that are contained in the fuel price are necessary and are calculated correctly. So we stand by that, and I think that these calls to scrap the fuel levy and to deal better with the RAF, I mean, they're all obviously coming from from Parliament and from different quarters, and there may be merit in them. We believe that conversation on the review needs to include role players from the private sector and from role players within the fuel sector who can decide on a way forward that is sustainable and not just a stopgap measure as the relief of the fuel levy is at the moment.
Well, the Deputy Director General at Mineral Resources and Energy would suggest that this is politicizing the issue. We heard the Democratic Alliance saying that it's easy for government because we have no choice, and it's easy to collect. And as you were saying, it's difficult to give that up. Is this a political issue, though?
It certainly has become a political debate. It has political overtones, and it has a political legacy, certainly, in the fuel price. And that political legacy is historic, and that's come a long way. So certainly there is a political basis to this, no question. But that should not inform the way forward. I think the way forward should be an economic debate. It should be a discussion on what is best for South Africans and for consumers generally. And that debate, we feel, needs to happen with the private sector. And with role players in the industry. To exclude all of these very important role players in the fuel value chain is almost counterproductive, in that it doesn't involve the people who are at the coalface of dealing with fuel issues on a daily basis. So our view is that there are experts in the fuel sector, very learned people who understand these issues very, very deeply, and they need to be involved along with civil society organizations such as the AA and others in having this review of the fuel price. And I sound like a broken record, Peter, but we think that is an absolutely vital step in dealing sustainably with a fuel price that is threatening to, at some point, get out of hand, if it hasn't already. So we think that debate is absolutely critical, and it should be maybe taken out of the hallowed halls of Parliament and involving people from, like I said, the private sector and civil society.
All right, you talk about reviewing the fuel price. Of those elements, which one concerns you the most? Which one is the most opaque when we're seeking transparency?
Yeah, I think there's a number of them in terms of opaqueness. I mean, if you read some research documents that have been done on the fuel price, there's certainly enough space to debate the basic fuel price itself, import parity pricing. There are issues around that. I think this debate around the fuel levy is something that the private sector and civil society can be a part of, taking maybe the political stance out of it and just focusing on the economic issues around it. Again, I think, once all of these issues are on the table and there is this group of people who are discussing these issues, where the problems are will be clarified very quickly by those there. But again, I think it requires experts, it requires role players, and the sooner that happens, and it's something we've been asking for a long time, the sooner that happens, the sooner we can perhaps get to a solution.
All right, and in the short term, do we expect, should government keep the fuel levy reduced?
I think for as long as they have the ability to do that, they certainly should do that. The Minister in Parliament indicated today that would be difficult for government. We would naturally want to ask, that does continue in the interests of consumers. So yes, I mean, we would certainly want to see that situation continue. But again, I think we've got space between now and August. There's 6 weeks between now and the August fuel adjustment when the levy returns to its normal levels. We think that it gives government ample time to convene, this group that we've been talking about to review the fuel price and to actually get that ball rolling. We can't dither on these issues anymore, and a debate in Parliament we don't think is going to be sufficient to actually make any meaningful change right now. It requires a collective effort that involves everybody and not just Parliament.
Layton Beard, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter.
All right, that's the Automobile Association of South Africa's spokesperson, Layton Beard, talking to us about the fuel levy, the fuel price, saying that we actually need to take a look at how that fuel price is made up, and perhaps government needs to start thinking about different ways of doing things, and looking at road safety could be one vehicle.